Hello and welcome to another edition of As the Blade Turns. My name is Dave Leese, and for those of you who are new here, please subscribe below, ring that bell for notifications of when we post. There's a lot of content coming up, and remember to smash that like button. Today I'm going to be covering a number of topics from the situation in Ukraine to the World Figure Skating Championships, some of the oligarchs that impact some of our favorite Olympic sports, and the situation in the United States USA Gymnastics Federation with regards to the national team coordinator and Valeri Liukin. I wanted to share an email interview that I did with Anastasiia Makarova. She is the secretary of the Ukrainian Figure Skating Federation, and I was able to do an interview with her over email. We had planned to do a phone interview, but with the bombing going on in Kiev, it was not possible. So I asked her a number of questions and was thinking that this would be of interest to our many viewers. I said, I was wondering if you could please describe for the viewers the situation you are experiencing first as a resident of Kiev. What is your daily life like with the bombing and curfews? Are you safe? Anastasiia said, me and my husband decided to stay in Kiev. We are in our flat in the center of the city. The air raid alerts are going from time to time. It could be as much to 10 or 30 per day. We also hear the bomb attacks. I continued, how has your life been impacted as the secretary of the Skating Federation? Is anyone even able to work with all that is going on? I am general secretary of the Ukrainian Figure Skating Federation, and of course trying to work as well. Every day we receive a lot of messages from the other federations and sports people with words of support and proposals for help. The president of the federation also stayed in Kiev. I said, Galina Yakovlevna told me that you were at a competition in Kharkov with 14 students and one other adult, and that the competition had to end due to bombing that you could feel in the hotel. And it was my understanding that you could not find a way back to the city, and there was a situation with the train, but there were no tickets being sold. Could you please explain to us, that situation and what was happening when things began on Thursday? And she replied, I was in Kharkov as a judge for our national novice competitions. Around 4:30 in the morning, my colleague from Dnipro city knocked on my door at the hotel. She was in panic because she was first hearing the bomb attacks. She immediately left with other people, children, coaches, and parents who had their own cars. The distance from Kharkov to Dnipro is around 90 miles. I cooperated with a group from Kiev at the ice rink. We stayed in a different hotel, but close to the rink. My colleague from Odessa did the same, but in our hotel. When we met at the ice rink, we started to manage our trip to Kiev. Our first thought was to go by bus, but the roads were already closed for an unknown time. We tried to find a ticket for the train. We found only 6 tickets to the night train. And I decided to go to the railway station and try to do something about it, depending on the situation there. The parents were back in Kiev of our skaters, and they could help us with a minivan via their friends in Kharkov. But the van was for 6 people, and we pushed into the van as many as 12 people. The rail station was a huge situation. A lot of people were trying to go home, but there were no tickets. Anastasiia was in the special sales department, and the staff was trying to help them find tickets one by one for the first express trains at 1 p.m., but to stay on the platform in the train, it wouldn't come for an hour, and during that time, they started hearing the bombs. Around 2:15 p.m., we heard that another train, and it wasn't a direct train from Kharkov to Kiev, it was going to Kiev, it was going to arrive on another platform. Anastasiia ran there because at the time they didn't know if their train would ever even come. So we pushed all into the railway carriage. It was very, very difficult because many people were in a panic. But fortunately, we were able to do it. Yes, the train ride did take 9 hours when it normally takes 6 because the train was traveling by detours and it was full of people. For example, the space for one person was occupied by as many as 3 or 4. Our colleague from Odessa was able to find a bus, and fortunately, they were able to return to Odessa the next day. I then asked, I said, Galina informed me that skaters are being sent to Poland to stay there with other families and train. How difficult is this for them? Are their families able to leave the country as well? She continued, yes, we received the invitation from our friends at the sport club of Axel Turin from the city of Turin, Poland, with the proposition of help with accommodation, food, etc. Now we have a lot of proposals from around the world, and we start to try to manage evacuation. First from Kharkov. Our colleague from Kharkov, Mr. Sergei Baranov, coordinated the first group and went with them to the border. The first part was done, and the group is now safe in Turin. Now Sergei stays near the border and helps as a volunteer for people and helps other skating children pass through the border. He is the coordinator there. I'm the coordinator in Kiev. We also have coordination persons in Odessa, but they help to get skaters out through the Moldova border because it's around 30 miles from Odessa. Many have decided to stay in Ukraine, but move to the west part, Lviv, for example. I continued, in a city like Kiev, where can people escape to? Is it safe to even leave the city? Is there anywhere to go? She said there's a place for some, and for some there's not. Women can leave with children. It's difficult, but it's possible to leave because there is huge traffic on the way to any borders. I continued, I wanted to ask a bit about the situation with the figure skaters who are scheduled to attend the upcoming World Figure Skating Championships. Obviously, figure skating feels so trivial and unimportant during this time, but I believe that it can help put the war into perspective for our viewers. She continued, we added the names as entries for the World Championships for our skaters, but we don't know what will take place. We're just trying to be optimistic. I continued, I said, had all of the skaters who competed at the Olympics returned home to Ukraine following the competition? And I also asked about Nazarova and Nikitin, who are listed as students of Alexander Zhulin. Were they in Moscow or in Ukraine when the attacks began? She replied, all Ukrainian skaters who participated in the Olympic Games returned home. Nazarova and Nikitin were not in Moscow for practices since the summer of 2021. They prepared for the Olympics in Kharkov. I then asked again, I had done these questions all at once about the entries for the World Championships and whether it was possible for the skaters to even train. Are there even airports for them to be able to get to Worlds, as the airports have been, many of them been bombed or seized? She said, I answered part of this question above, but now, nobody has ice in Ukraine to practice. And I said, Ivan Shumatko, Artem Derensky, and Maxim Nikitin are all adults. My understanding is that men ages 18 to 60 are not allowed to leave Ukraine and are expected to join the army. Are these skaters joining the army to fight against the Russians? What is that situation? And she said, I don't have any information about Ivan. Artem is in the city of Dnipro. Maxim is in Kharkov. She's not asking them if they're going into the army or territorial defense, but she does know that many former skaters and coaches, as well as other people, men and women, are going to the Ukrainian territorial defense. I said, have you had any contact with the skaters as a member of the Federation? I try day to day to find and speak with more and more of our members. We have a Viber group, and every morning we monitor the situation in the Ukrainian regions where our coaches, skaters, etc. live. And I said, is there any way that our viewers can help the people of Ukraine or other figure skaters, perhaps those staying in Poland? Are there safe places to donate and send resources? She says, I need to find the time to manage this question, and I will come back with an answer. Now it's very difficult, for sure, in Ukraine, but people are trying to find a way to donate. And this is something that the Ice House in New Jersey is also working to do. And I followed with the question that many people will want an answer to, although it is always unpleasant to ask questions like this in this time, but it's certainly newsworthy. I said, do you have any comments about the situation to exclude the Russian and Belarusian skaters from sporting events that can help our viewers understand the larger situation? She said, first of all, this position is not only from Ukraine, this position is also from the major skating federation, from the ISU, and this is the position of the IOC, and not only for skaters. She says, a couple words personally for myself. You can't imagine what we have. This is a really horrible war. Ukraine was in the Second World War, and it was the same horror. We need help from the world. We need military help from the world, from NATO. The people around the world must understand now there is a third world war in which only two countries are at war. Russia is at war with the whole world, and Ukraine is at war for the whole world. And she then said if we have any more questions for her, and that she'll be glad to answer them. She says, it's really like a horror movie. We need a hero like Bruce Willis to save the earth. So I hope you appreciate that Anastasiia took time with all that is going on and all of the many bombings and being in and out of bomb shelters to describe the efforts to all of you. And we will certainly be following up about how you can aid the people of Ukraine. I did want to talk a bit about the upcoming field for the 2022 World Figure Skating Championships. They are set to take place in Montpellier in France. And many have worried that this championship, which is scheduled to take place March 21st to the 27th, won't ever actually take place. Although as of right now, all things are moving ahead. And this competition will be used to determine the entry quotas for each federation at the 2023 World Championships. What's interesting is that neither Russia, Belarus, nor China are going to compete at these championships. Russia and Belarus are obviously barred from participating at the event, but China isn't sending a team either. There have been many different rumors for why China is not participating, from funding to vaccines to who knows, obviously politically. There's a lot going on right now in the world, but very interesting that neither federation is going to participate. You have to think about the pair field where Russia and China have dominated for so many years. It completely opens up that field. One has to think about, it is likely that the United States could actually medal in pairs in ice dance and men and not medal in the women's event based on the field, potentially, what could take place. It's very interesting, but it will be a interesting competition for sure. One has to look at the top competitors. As of right now, Nathan Chen is listed to be participating. Yuzuru Hanyu is not. He is citing an ankle injury and said that he would not have skated if it weren't the Olympic Games, and said that that is why he agreed to participate in that event. Yuma Kageyama, Kao Miura, and Shoma Uno are listed as the entries for Japan. Daniel Grasso and Matteo Rizzo from Italy are top field. Morris Kvitishvili, now he was born in Russia, trains in Russia, but represents Georgia. He is listed as being able to compete. Junhwa Cha potentially has an opportunity for a great result. Matteo Rizzo, Daniel Grasso, Nathan Chen, Ilya Malinin, Vincent Zhou, really leading that field. Kevin Amos from France, Keegan Messing, Roman Sadovsky. Those are your top entries in the men's event. In the women's event, Kailani Crane, Olga Makutina, Ekaterina Ryabova. Now, she is born and raised in Russia, represents Azerbaijan. Interesting. Luna Hendricks is going to be competing. She has definitely a shot for a medal. Manny Skizas from Canada. Interesting. Anastasia Gubanova, another Russian who's representing Georgia. And from Japan, Wakaba Higuchi, Mana Kawabe, and Kaori Sakamoto. Wakaba and Kaori certainly expected to compete for the medals at this championship. Poland, Katerina Kurakova, again a Russian. She trains in Italy. No word on where she was in the immediate aftermath of the Olympic Games. From South Korea, Yilim Kim and Young Yu will be competing for medals. And in the United States contingent, Mariah Bell, Karen Chen, and Alyssa Liu. If we look at the pairs, this is the field that is really the most opened up by both the absence of China and Russia. Obviously, the women's field wide open without Russia, but more actual top contenders are not appearing. Now, Canada is very interesting because Vanessa James and Eric Radford are appearing again. Kirsten Moore-Towers is not, and she is a skater who is so close to the medals, being in about sixth place for so many years. Without China and Russia, one would think that she had a better chance here, although this has not been her best season. so perhaps she wouldn't have been in for a medal either, but certainly would have been in it for a positive placement to end her career. It also looks competing for a medal. Riku Miura and Ruichi Kihara, the Japanese pair team, appears to potentially be the favorite for gold at these World Championships, and what a huge accomplishment that would be for Japanese figure skating, who has been so dominant which has been so dominant in the singles fields, but not yet in pairs. This would certainly be a breakthrough for them, and certainly I think many people would be behind them at this competition. Other top skaters would be Ashley Kane-Gribble, Timothy Leduc, and Alexa Knierim and Brandon Fraser, I think, are looking at your top medal contenders. In the ice dance field, certainly the Canadians have three strong teams. Laurence Fournier-Baudry, Nikolai Sorensen, Piper Gillis and Paul Poirier, Marjorie Lajoie, and Zachary Lacroix. The French, Gabriela Papadakis and Guillaume Cizeron, certainly expected to win at home. Lila Fear and Lewis Gibson from the UK. Lila's sister Sasha Fear and George Waddell will also be competing here. Charlene Guignard and Marco Fabri, obviously medal contenders. Japan is sending Kana Muramoto and Daisuke Takahashi. And we'll also be seeing Olivia Smart and Adrian Diaz. And the Americans, obviously, medal contenders, Madison Chalk and Evan Bates, Caitlin Hawayak and John Luke Baker, and Madison Hubble and Zachary Donahue. I'm interested to know from those of you who watch this video, are you going to be more or less interested in the competition? We were discussing this on TSL Live and drawing comparisons to the Olympic Games, where after Simone Biles withdrew from many events due to suffering from the twisties, it actually made the competitions potentially more interesting as they were more competitive, as Simone was expected to dominate and win gold as she had for many years, where the results were, fait accompli. So it certainly made that, an intellectually interesting competition, even though we all missed seeing the performances of Simone Biles there. So it certainly will make the World Championships perhaps unpredictable and allow many skaters to have career-defining moments. With many of you, I'm certainly looking forward to watching the World Figure Skating Championships, and this recent political development has just made the event so much more fascinating to witness. Also, we have to wonder, under the rules, will Russia, China, and Belarus only be allowed to have one entry in each discipline when they return to competition? That's something that hasn't really been addressed or discussed by the ISU, but under the rules, it would seem to suggest that they would only have one entry. So imagine 3 Russian ladies or 7 Russian ladies competing for one spot at a World Figure Skating Championships. Very, very strange to see, but something that could definitely be a reality in the coming years. I did want to mention an interesting note about a program that we watched many times this season. When Elena Bechki was on the recap, she talked about music that Mishina and Galyamov used that was very recognizable to Russians. It is from the film Time Forward, and it is by Sviridov. And Sviridov's orchestral suite was written for the film, and it was one of the most recognizable music pieces of the Soviet era, and became a sort of calling card for the Soviet Union himself. Since 1986, it has been used as the theme song of Vremya, the TV news program on USSR Central Television and Russian Channel 1. The tune has been reorchestrated a few times since then. Now, many people argue that it's really the theme of propaganda news, which is rather ironic that Tamara Moskvina used it. She's certainly become infamous for her statements about the Russian mafia not existing, and little details as part of her statements in the documentary Meddling and the other documentary on Netflix about the 2002 Olympic scandal. The association with the Olympics is many with this music. It was performed at the closing ceremony of the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver, and it was also performed at the 2014 Winter Olympics, which were held in Sochi. At that opening ceremony, the theme was used again during a scene depicting national industrialization and collectivization of agriculture in the Soviet Union. The dancers wore red and black costumes while they interacted with huge figurative tractors giant ditch diggers, gears, and similar engine parts. The Russian rhythmic gymnastics team used the overture in their gold medal winning all-around routine at the 2016 Summer Olympics. That team was coached, obviously, by Irina Viner, wife of Alishir Usmanov, we also talk about in this video. One organization that hasn't taken a stance against the invasion of Ukraine remains the FIG, or the International Gymnastics Federation. There's currently a World Cup event taking place in Doha, and Russian gymnasts are actually competing there. Now, we haven't had a Russian doping case in the sport of artistic gymnastics. There have been doping cases in rhythmic gymnastics. I did want to point out, though, that before we say perhaps the artistic gymnasts are not under the same state-sponsored doping program, it is important to connect a few dots. The artistic gymnasts also visit the same doctor in Munich that all of the figure skaters and rhythmic gymnasts visit. This is the same doctor that Irina Viner is seen calling during the Over the Limit documentary. The doctor in Munich uses octavagan, which is a banned and controversial substance. So there are some parallels here that perhaps this remains grossly inappropriate by the FIG, certainly in light of the invasion. But there's certainly more to know about the artistic gymnastics world and their ties. Remember, the FIG and Russian gymnastics in general are both sponsored by VTB, one of the Russian banks that was recently sanctioned by the US Department of Treasury. Also, honorary president of the Russian Olympic Committee, Leonid Tygashev, spoke about the decision of the International Paralympic Committee to remove Russian athletes from the Beijing Games. The day before, the IPC allowed the Russian team to compete at the Paralympics in a neutral status, but later announced that they were not allowed to compete. This lump will roll over for a very long time because Thomas Bach, head of the IOC, does not affect anything. He is under America, WADA, and is under America. This is very bad information, Tygashev said. Now that's very interesting because Thomas Bach has actually been accused of being in the pocket of Vladimir Putin ever since the games were awarded to Sochi, and Putin paid more than $50 billion to host the Winter Olympics in a summer resort city in Sochi, Russia. And that has been really something that has been really reiterated. Christine Brennan loves that factoid in many of her articles. But it is important to note that Thomas Bach did not punish Russia as harshly as he could have in 2016, 2018, or 2022. They were not allowed to have the flag. They were not allowed to have the anthem played, and they were the ROC instead of the Russian Federation. But many felt it wasn't a real punishment, even though the Russians did act out in their media as though it was the harshest punishment imaginable. So it's very interesting that they are now saying that Thomas Bach is under the thumb of America, because Americans were arguing that Thomas Bach was under the thumb of Russia, just as the blade turns. The Minister of Sports of the Russian Federation, Oleg Matysyn, said that a program of competitions on the territory of Russia with the participation of foreign athletes will soon be developed. In the near future, a program will be developed to develop a system of competitions on the territory of the Russian Federation with the participation of a maximum number of foreign athletes. First of all, Belarusian athletes, and competitions within the CIS, SCO, and BRICS. We are not isolated. We continue contacts with international federations. We hope that these are temporary measures and reason will prevail. And the entire international community will understand that the split that is happening now is unacceptable. Sport should act as one of the conductors of diplomacy and the restoration of triumph of human values, Matysyn said. Very interesting. I certainly had suggested in a previous video that I didn't think that Russia would just roll over and stop participating in figure skating, hosting their own competitions. Very interesting. Two important things to remember. The Russian economy is certainly tanking at the moment, and there is the suspicion that Russia will be under martial law. How that impacts figure skating, gymnastics, Olympic sports, we will have to wait and see, but it'll certainly be interesting. Certainly there could be controversy if there are figure skating competitions being held when the average Russian, can't put bread on their table. What will that mean for the average Russian person? But it is something that could take place, and it's certainly something that we will all be following in the current situation and in the upcoming months. President of the Russian Figure Skating Federation, Alexander Gorshkov, answered the question about the possible change of sport citizenship by Russian skaters. Earlier, the ISU suspended Russian athletes from international competitions. I don't think that any of the members of the Russian figure skating team will change sports citizenship due to the current situation in the world. Naturally, no one has expressed such a desire. In addition, for our part, we will do everything possible to protect our athletes and coaches and help them solve their main problems, Gorshkov said. Press Secretary of the President of the Russian Federation, Dmitri Peskov, spoke about the removal of Russian Paralympic athletes from the Games in Beijing. This situation is, of course, monstrous. This is a shame for the International Paralympic Committee. I can't say otherwise. Yesterday, one decision was made. The IPC allowed the Russians to participate in the Paralympics in a neutral status. Today, this decision has been changed, so of course, we strongly condemn the International Paralympic Committee for its decision, Peskov said. Peskov, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the Russians who was sanctioned today. I did want to just point out what Gorshkov was said about changing citizenships. This is something that the ISU had been looking to crack down on. It's definitely something that had been joked about by the main public during the Olympics, with so many skaters from Russia and even the US representing other countries. Now, this is certainly an interesting situation because there are a few Russians who could compete for other countries. Annabelle Morozov has 3 citizenship opportunities. She could compete for France, she can compete for the US, or she could stay and be banned with the rest of the Russian figure skaters for as long as that ban takes place. Diana Davis also has American citizenship as someone who was born here. Very interesting to note what would happen with either of those. Annabelle probably would be the more likely to be able to switch countries because she did not compete in 2022. So based on the periods of that she would be required to sit out, Annabelle not competing in the 2022 Olympics or European Championships would certainly help her out and lessen that time that she would have to sit out. Now, would the Russian Figure Skating Federation release either of those athletes? Certainly remains to be seen. They've certainly invested money in both of them as high-profile ice dancers, and we will have to just wait and see. There were certainly a lot of calls for Kosternaya to represent other countries yesterday. Again, she is another athlete that has been invested in by the Russian Figure Skating Federation. They are less likely to let those athletes go, as many federations are beginning to really resent the fact that they are, having athletes leave them so easily. This is something that has happened in the U.S. as skaters have tried to leave, and the U.S. Figure Skating Federation has made that more financially difficult for those skaters to obtain a release. Choreographer Ilya Averbuk spoke about the doping scandal with Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva. During the Beijing Olympics, it became known that Valieva had tested positive for the drug trimetazidine. The reporter asked, "You went to the 2022 Olympics as a commentator. You saw everything with your own eyes. What do you think? If it were not for the scandal with the doping test of Kamila Valieva, what would be the alignment of our single girls?" "Yes, I was at the Beijing Olympics. She left mixed feelings. Sport does not tolerate subjunctive moods. I find it foolish enough to make such predictions. Undoubtedly, Kamila Valieva is a brilliant, gifted young girl. Thanks to her hard work and God-sent talent, she has been given the opportunity to show everything that can be shown. She is incomparable and perfect on the ice. Of course, this nervous situation could not but affect her performance, but sport is always an unpredictable genre, and in sport, the strongest win in everything. I believe that Anastasiya Makarova became an Olympic champion absolutely rightfully and deservedly, having passed the most difficult sports road. Therefore, once again, I congratulate Anya Sherbakova and Sasha Trusova, who was not enough at all. Well, Kamila Valieva is a 15-year-old girl, and she has everything to show in 4 years that she is worthy of the title of Olympic champion. I think this should be the point. We need to support Kamila in those trials that she has yet to go through. Because of the doping scandal, she has not disappeared anywhere, and of course, the proceedings will still continue. But I wish, Kamila, that all this ends as soon as possible, and that there are as few sanctions as possible in relation to our talented skater, said Averbuk. Averbuk is obviously aligned with the Terry Tudberidze professionally, having been a choreographer for Terry and an employer of many of her figure skaters in shows, to which she earns 40% of, especially in the case of Evgenia Medvedeva. Now, interesting to note here is that he is gaslighting us, potentially, by saying that Kamila Valieva would appear in the Olympics in 4 years. Ilya Averbuk, having worked with so many Russian figure skaters, knows very well how unlikely it is for a student of a Terry Tudberidze to make one Olympic Games, let alone a second. So for him to say that Kamila Valieva will show everything in 4 years is perhaps an insult to our intelligence, but it is perhaps the right thing to say to the Russian press. In a video the other day, I spoke about the Russian oligarchs and how they are tied to Russian Olympic sport. Two of those oligarchs are Alishir Usmanov and Dmitri Peskov. Both Peskov and Alishir Usmanov were sanctioned by the White House today. They had already been sanctioned by the EU. The UK also sanctioned Alishir Usmanov today. Now, it is interesting. The Biden administration said in a statement that the sanctions will be put on Russian elites and their family members who continue supporting President Putin despite his brutal invasion of Ukraine. Among those sanctioned is Dmitri Peskov, whose family and critical assets were not listed in the official White House statement. Peskov serves as Vladimir Putin's press secretary and handles media relations and statements on behalf of Putin and the Russian government. As President Biden said, we will continue to work with our allies and partners to hold accountable the Russian oligarchs and corrupt leaders who are profiting from this violent regime, the White House said. Now, I do think that this is an interesting omission, perhaps incorrect, depending on which side you are. Dmitri Peskov's wife is Tatiana Navka. Now, Tatiana Navka was able to have figure skating shows that took place during the coronavirus, and she is actually a major employer of Alina Zagitova in the show ranks. Alina Zagitova, who is obviously a major financial cash cow for Team Tudberidze. So just an interesting note about the flow of money going from Peskov to Navka to Team Tudberidze. Certainly an interesting note there. Now, Alishir Usmanov is the head of the International Fencing Organization. He is also the husband of Irina Viner. He is estimated to have a net worth of $20 billion, and it has also been alleged, rumored, suggested, bandied about that when Irina Viner wants rhythmic gymnasts to retire, they are given apartments and cars to stop embarrassing her with their bad performances and are introduced to very wealthy husbands. That has been the allegation, although who knows. But it has certainly been the scuttlebutt for many years in the rhythmic gymnastics community. I did want to read an article about Alishir Usmanov, who is certainly an interesting figure that we should all learn more about, especially as lovers of glitz and glam and subjective sports such as figure skating and rhythmic gymnastics. Remember, Alishir Usmanov ran Gazprom, a major sponsor of Team Tudberidze. Well, this is from the Guardian article that came out today. Alishir Usmanov, ex-fencer who solved Putin's business problems, is sanctioned. From a first fortune made from manufacturing plastic bags, which were in short supply in the Soviet Union, Alishir Usmanov's business dealings saw him rise to become one of the 100 richest people in the world, buying multi-million-pound mansions and stakes in English Premier League football clubs along the way. Now the Uzbek-born billionaire risks losing some of the trappings of his extreme wealth after he was placed on the EU sanctions list, which named him as one of Vladimir Putin's favorite oligarchs. The 68-year-old metals magnate was ranked 99th on Forbes magazine's 2021 billionaires list, with an estimated fortune of $14.1 billion. On Thursday, he was also added to the UK sanctions list, meaning he is facing asset freezes on anything he owns in Britain or the EU, including his lavish UK property portfolio, leaving him unable to sell, mortgage, or rent out his homes. It is true. That Forbes article lists his net worth as 14.1 billion. Other articles have listed above 20. It's not bad to be Usmanov, maybe until today. But the long and short of it is, the man is rich. On Thursday, he was added to the UK sanctions list. Usmanov's 600 million super yacht, Dilbar, which is named after his mother and thought to be the largest in the world by gross tonnage, was reported on Wednesday night to have been seized by German authorities from a Hamburg shipyard, according to Forbes magazine, citing 3 sources. Officials in the port city later denied the vessel had been confiscated. However, a spokesperson for Hamburg's economic authority said there were no plans to return the boat to its owner. No yacht is going to leave the port that is not allowed to do so, they said. The EU has published an eye-catching list of reasons for blacklisting Usmanov. It claims he paid millions to an influential Putin advisor, fronted for President Putin, and solved his business problems, and offered the use of his personal residences to one of the president's most senior political allies. In a country where key business positions depend on the will of Putin, Usmanov is entrusted with servicing financial flows, the EU alleges. The EU also said Usmanov's interests in media and internet companies had actively supported the Russian government's attempts to destabilize Ukraine, including the curtailing of editorial independence after he took control of the Russian business newspaper Kommersant. Usmanov hit back, accusing the EU of false and defamatory allegations that were damaging his honor, dignity, and business reputation. In the UK, even before he was added to the sanctions list, he had already lost some of his influence in the world of sport. Everton Football Club moved on Wednesday to suspend all sponsorship deals with his USM Holdings company. This include a £12 million a year sponsorship of the training ground under a 5-year arrangement that began in 2017. Usmanov does not have biological children, but his football interests became a family affair when his nephew, Sarvar Ismailov, briefly sat on Everton's board and was the sporting and commercial director of its women's team. Ismailov stepped down for personal reasons in November 2021, shortly before he appeared in court charged with grievous bodily harm. He was accused of assaulting a model as part of the same incident. The case was later dismissed, owing to a lack of evidence. Sport has played a prominent role in Usmanov's life. He was once a fencer and met his future wife, Irina Viner, at a gym in Tashkent before she went on to become Russia's top rhythmic gymnastics coach. Earlier in the week, the oligarch stepped down as president of the International Fencing Federation, a position he has held since 2008, saying he would suspend his duties until justice is restored. He added that he would use all legal means to protect his honor and reputation. Fencing was perhaps a fitting hobby for a businessman born in the Soviet Uzbekistan who came to prominence and wealth through the cutthroat metals and mining industry. His colorful life even saw him spend 6 years in jail during the late Soviet era after a conviction he claimed was politically motivated and which was later overturned. In the years after the breakup of the Soviet Union, Usmanov was a director of several companies and financial firms. By the late 1990s, he was the general director of the state-owned energy company Gazprom's investment arm, which he managed for more than a decade. Usmanov's largest holding remains in the steel and mining company Metal Oinvest, which he founded and where he remains the main beneficiary with a 49% stake owned through USM. He brought the Grade 2 listed Beechwood in North London for £48 million in 2008 through Hanley Limited, a company based on the Isle of Man. He has also been reported to own Sutton Place, a 72-room Tudor mansion near Guildford in Surrey, built in the 1520s by a courtier of Henry VIII and once owned by the U.S. oil baron John Paul Getty. Usmanov's spokesperson has disputed the information about his property ownership, but did not say whether he was still the beneficial owner of one or both of the properties. Well, I did want to talk a little bit about his yacht, which was requested by viewers of the last video. And I'm going to start with the update to the Forbes article and then read it. Update: according to the Ministry of Economy and Innovation in the German state of Hamburg, the country's authorities have not seized the Dilbar, a 512-foot yacht owned by sanctioned Russian billionaire Alishir Usmanov. As Forbes reported on Wednesday, work on the ship has been halted at the Hamburg shipyard, where it has been stationed for refitting work since October. 3 sources had told Forbes it had been seized. but a representative for Usmanov cited the statement from the Ministry of Hamburg to confirm that it had not. In its statement, the ministry elaborated that the German Federal Customs Agency is the responsible enforcement authority and will have to issue an export waiver for the yacht to leave, and that no yacht leaves port that is not allowed to do so. The yacht is registered in the Cayman Islands and owned through a holding company, making it difficult to tie directly to Usmanov for the purpose of sanctions. In its statement, the ministry in Hamburg added that restrictions could be imposed on a yacht owned by a sanctioned Russian individual only if the ownership situation is clearly clarified, and all these possessions are also sanctioned. The ministry confirmed to Forbes that the yacht is still in the dock at the Hamburg shipyards of Blohm and Voss. Forbes contacted the German Ministry of Economic Affairs, and the Federal Customs Service has not received an immediate response. Russian billionaire Alishir Usmanov was sanctioned by the European Union on Monday. 2 years later, Forbes has learned from 3 sources in the yacht industry that work has been halted on one of his prized possessions, the 512-foot yacht Dilbar, valued at nearly $600 million in the northern city of Hamburg, where it had been stationed for refitting at the shipyards of Blohm and Voss since October. The ship has been in the Hamburg shipyards of German shipbuilding firm Blohm and Voss since late October for a refitting job. Sources who spoke to Forbes said that the German government froze the asset, and that, likely as a result, Blohm and Voss employees who had been working on the yacht didn't show up to work on Wednesday. A spokesperson for Lürssen, the German shipbuilder which owns Blohm and Voss, declined to comment on Thursday. All orders and projects of the Lürssen Group and its subsidiaries are treated in accordance with the applicable laws and regulations, the spokesperson said. Representatives for Usmanov didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. Usmanov purchased Dilbar in 2016 for a reported $600 million from Lürssen, which custom-built it for him over 52 months. The firm calls it one of the most complex and challenging yachts ever built, in terms of both dimensions and technology. At 15,917 tons, it's the world's largest motor yacht by gross tonnage, and is typically manned by a crew of 96 people. Dilbar boasts the largest swimming pool ever installed on a yacht, as well as 2 helicopter pads, a sauna, a beauty salon, and a gym. Its plush interiors have more than 1,000 sofa cushions, and it can host up to 24 people in 12 suites. The yacht is part of Usmanov's estimated multi-billion-dollar fortune, which spans stakes in iron ore and steel giant Metalloinvest and consumer electronics firm Xiaomi, as well as smaller holdings in telecom, mining, and media. One of the earliest investors in Facebook, along with the fellow billionaire Yuri Milner, Usmanov also owns extensive real estate assets in the West, ranging from 2 estates in the UK, Beechwood House in London, and Sutton Place in Surrey, valued at a combined $280 million, to luxury homes in Munich, Lausanne, Monaco, and Sardinia. Usmanov sold his 30% stake in English soccer team Arsenal FC in 2018 for nearly $700 million in cash, but until this week had ties to soccer through USM Holdings and Megaphone sponsorships of Everton FC. The Premier League team said on Wednesday that it was suspending the arrangements in light of Russia's attack on Ukraine. Usmanov isn't the only Russian billionaire with a mega yacht. Forbes and yacht valuation experts Vessel Value tracked down 32 of them. On Tuesday, Usmanov commented on the EU sanctions imposed on him in a statement to the International Fencing Federation, where he also announced he was stepping down as the organization's president. I believe that such decision is unfair, and the reasons employed to justify the sanctions are a set of false and defamatory allegations, damaging my honor, dignity, and business reputation, he wrote. I will use all legal means to protect my honor and reputation. As I was recording this video, I received a message from someone, a member of our TSL live show, and I just wanted to read it for you. I think it's written hyperbolically, perhaps in jest, I don't know, but it does discuss the interaction and the intersection of sports and politics, which we all find so fascinating. It says, emergency alert. Dave, please, if you can, get in touch with Irina Viner immediately, please. The Duma is set to meet tomorrow. They are planning to pass a law that will jail journalists for broadcasting fake news. Up to 15 years in jail, it's being reported. Irina is a firecracker, and now that people are seeing the writing on the wall with an imploding economy, we just might see some flashes of heroism. Tell Irina it's her moment to become the Russian John McCain. She can take a stand or be remembered on the wrong side of history. The choice is hers. Her international legacy is is on the line. Well, I wanted to take a moment just to discuss Irina Rodnina. I actually was thinking of discussing her and her relationship with Tatiana Tarasova. Earlier, there are some interesting notes about that, about how the former pupil and student no longer speak. Irina's daughter, Alyona Minkovsky, is actually a journalist in the U.S., and a journalist who has worked for very liberal publications. She's a frequent commentator on MSNBC, often speaking on U.S.-Russian relations. Now, that's so interesting because her mother is obviously an Olympic icon, and also she is a member of the Duma, right? Alyona was raised in the U.S. Remember, Irina Rodnina was a coach in Lake Arrowhead. Now, she is also, she was a political commentator for RT America, and she also worked for HuffPost Live for many years, and she also works for the online magazine Salon. So it's just interesting how her mother is in the Russian Duma, and she is perhaps even hired for that potential conflict of interest by these other organizations, and has been hired almost exclusively MSNBC, Huffington Post Live, and Salon. So just very interesting note there about Irina Rodnina and that situation. Irina Rodnina was also in a Twitter controversy. On September 13th, 2013, she caused a stir when she tweeted a doctored photo of U.S. President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle, with Obama's mouth full of food, with a Photoshopped banana in the image's foreground. She said she was practicing her right to free expression, but critics claim she was making a racist comment about the African-American president. On February 10th, 2014, so 5 months later, Rodnina in her Twitter claimed that her account was hacked at the time of posting the offensive photograph and apologized for her handling of the affair. As if the sports world wasn't interesting enough, an article came out in the OC Register today. Valeri Liukin, frontrunner for top USA Gymnastics post, is being investigated for alleged verbal and mental abuse. The U.S. Center for SafeSport has been investigating the former Olympic and world champion since at least January. USA Gymnastics CEO Valeri Liukin has been aware of the allegations since early February. For some background information, for those of you who haven't been following along or who have forgotten, Valeri Liukin originally took over for Marta Karolyi after the 2016 Olympic Games, and then he resigned approximately 1 year later. Tom Forster, in a recent interview, said that he viewed himself as a placeholder in that position until Valeri Liukin reclaimed the post. And that seemed to be a rather surprising situation, as though it had appeared that Valeri Liukin was resigning as things were surfacing about his gym at the time, but they never became overly public in the media the same way situations about the Karolyis and obviously Larry Nassar did. This article is quite graphic. Just it deals with mental health and suicide. So if anyone doesn't want to listen to that, I put this at the end of the video for a reason. The first two overdoses were accidents. Megan Marengi, first two overdoses were with Klonopin, an anti-anxiety drug. She wasn't trying to kill herself either time. She was just trying to suppress a feeling of worthlessness that she said she began to feel when she trained as a young girl under Valeri Liukin at the international renowned World Olympic Gymnastics Academy in Plano, Texas. I just wanted to numb everything, said Marengi, who was then a student at the University of North Carolina. This time was different. This time Marengi wanted to end everything. Her once promising gymnastics career ended by injury. Her aspirations of becoming a doctor also dashed. Marengi said she recalled a series of rants Liukin, an Olympic and world champion for the Soviet Union, had directed at her, and she stared at a bottle of trazodone, an antidepressant, in her apartment near the Chapel Hill campus. Valeri always said I was lazy. He said that I'm fat, I'm useless, and I'm not ever going to amount to anything in life, and I believed all of it, Marengi said in a recent interview. I thought he was right. I amounted to nothing. Why am I still here? Since I'm not an Olympian, I was nothing. If I'm not going to be a doctor, I was nothing. It didn't feel like there was another option. I was all of this. If I'm not this, I am nothing. So Marengi swallowed the entire bottle of pills. It was almost like Valeri had won, she recalled. Marengi soon realized she made a mistake. She called a friend and was rushed to a hospital later. Liukin, now 55, is the frontrunner to be named by USA Gymnastics as the women's national team high-performance director, despite being investigated by the U.S. Center for SafeSport for multiple allegations of verbal and psychological abuse of young gymnasts. USA Gymnastics officials, including CEO Valeri Liukin, are aware of the allegations, according to a Southern California news group investigation. Liukin, the father and coach of 2008 Olympic all-around champion Anastasiia Liukin, has been under investigation by the U.S. Center for SafeSport since at least January 27th, according to SafeSport emails and documents obtained by SCNG. Liukin, Stephanie Koropin, USA Gymnastics Chief Programs Officer, and Annie Heffernan, the organization's vice president for the women's program, have been aware of abuse allegations against Liukin since at least February 9th, according to a series of email exchanges between top USA Gymnastics officials and former Woga gymnasts. The one thing I just want to point out there is that he was the organization's national high-performance director. At the time, it was the national team coordinator. But he did resign for a reason. So this cannot be necessarily news. Obviously, there's an official SafeSport report. There are also podcasts about people mentioned in this article. There have been poems written by Caitlin Ohashi. This has not been a big secret. So I just wanted to interject that. So if USA Gymnastics is going to say that they only found out on January 27th, it really strains credulity, as this is obviously an open situation. I wouldn't even say an open secret. If they had done any due diligence about a former employee, I believe that they should be aware of certainly the podcast with Mackenzie Wooford and the comments by Caitlin Ohashi, who spoke out against her former coach when she went viral both times. So this is certainly something that is far from a secret in the sport about Valeri Liukin. And it's very interesting that USA Gymnastics, as they try to rebrand and move forward, would choose Liukin because an article like this one was certainly going to be coming their way. And it seems that even though they have been making settlements with the Nassar survivors, it does not seem as though USA Gymnastics can really get out of their own way. Multiple gymnasts allege that they were routinely berated, belittled, and screamed at by Liukin, that he forced them to compete and train on broken bones or when they were ill, and they were fat-shamed daily, according to SafeSport complaints and USA Gymnastics documents and multiple interviews by SCNG. Some of the gymnasts were as young as 10 years old at the time of the alleged abuse. Being called fat, worthless, weak, stupid, idiot, etc. was a normal occurrence. Mackenzie Wooford, a former U.S. national team member who trained under Liukin at Woga, wrote in a complaint filed by the U.S. Center for SafeSport. Going into the gym, I was terrified about what was going to happen that day, while there were multiple incidents that were traumatizing. Liukin regularly forced gymnasts to run on the treadmill or in the Texas summer heat in sweatsuits if he deemed them overweight, even though some of the girls weighed less than 80 pounds at age 14, 15, or 16, according to SafeSport complaints and interviews. A Woga gymnast was allegedly forced by Liukin to work out even though she had just completed doctor-ordered bed rest after an eating disorder left her heart weak. Marengi said in an interview that she witnessed Liukin drag Nastia into his office and scream at her. She would come out bawling her eyes out. She also alleges she saw Liukin push his daughter up against the wall. Valeri Liukin did not respond to an email dealing the allegations presented in this article or multiple phone messages. Anastasiia Liukin did not respond to an email requesting comment. Multiple attempts to reach her by telephone were unsuccessful. Also, one of the interesting things is that when Valeri was the national team performance director, Nastia was still a commentator for NBC. Nastia had also been on the selection committee for years, and obviously had had ties with Marta Caroli and Kathy Kelly for years. So it was interesting that she did not have to recuse herself as an NBC commentator. Certainly an interesting decision that NBC made, as it is rife with conflicts of interest. They simply joked and danced around the topic that Valeri was the high performance director and that Nastia was really selling his decisions, perhaps to the public. There weren't many controversial things that happened during his time as high performance director, though there certainly could have been. And Nastia certainly would have been in the position to defend or perhaps sell those decisions to the public. So just very interesting about that kind of conflict of interest. One of the most alarming charges against Liukin stems from an alleged incident during a 2011 U.S. national team training camp at the Crowley Ranch in remote central Texas. Wilford, 15 at the time, became extremely sick shortly after arriving at the complex, a U.S. Olympic training center owned and operated by Marta Karolyi, the U.S. national coordinator, through the 2004 to 2016 Olympic cycles, and her husband Bella, also a former U.S. national team coordinator and Olympic team coach for the U.S. and Romania. I had a stomach virus that he did not seem to care about, Wilford wrote in her U.S. Center for SafeSport complaint, referring to Liukin. I was having diarrhea every 30 minutes or so. I had to stop in the middle of verification routines for Marta Karolyi and the national team staff to run to the bathroom. The whole time he accused me of being a wimp and faking. They checked my temperature and I had a fever, so they stuck me in the back of the gym to condition. The next day, I was back at it, still had diarrhea at least every 30 minutes. He still called me a baby because his daughter had competed on broken bones. But so did I. This was different. Then he forced me to show the trainer my diarrhea after I went one time in front of everyone. This was mortifying. Since becoming USA Gymnastics' CEO in February 2019, Liukin has repeatedly stressed that an emphasis has been placed on athlete safety in the wake of the Larry Nassar scandal, in which the former U.S. Olympic and national team coach is alleged to have sexually assaulted as many as 500 young athletes, including at least 6 Olympic champions. USA Gymnastics, the sport's Indianapolis-based national governing body, and the U.S. Olympic Committee reached a $380 million settlement with the survivors of Nassar's abuse. But to many, Liukin, a longtime member of the Karolyi Inner Circle, symbolizes the culture of abuse within American gymnastics during the Karolyi era that enabled the decades-long predatory behavior of Nassar and other U.S. Olympic and national team coaches and officials. After Larry Nassar, the biggest promise USA Gymnastics made was they were going to change the culture, said Christy Wooford, Mackenzie's mother, in an interview. They were going to clear out who was there when Nassar was there, who was there when all of it went on. Valeri was dead in the middle of it, and now for him to come back, I would be very concerned with Valeri bringing the old culture of mental abuse that he put those girls through. It just makes no sense. It's still all about win at any cost. SCNG provided USA Gymnastics a list of questions on the hiring process, the U.S. Center for SafeSport investigation, and allegations made to Liukin by former gymnasts. Jill Greer, USA Gymnastics' Chief Communications and Marketing Officer, responded in a brief email. USA Gymnastics has neither offered nor filled a position, she wrote. The process is ongoing. The U.S. Center for SafeSport assigned an investigator to the Wooford case on January 25th. Liukin, Christy Wooford said, can't plead that she doesn't know about Valeri because she knows about him. Mackenzie Wooford sent an email detailing Liukin's alleged abuse to Liukin on February 9th. Coropin and Heffernan were CC'd on the email that came with the subject line, urgent, Valeri Liukin concerns, please help. I found out recently that this abusive, manipulative coach who has recently stepped down from his position is back to coaching young gymnasts, Wooford wrote to Liukin. How is this possible when we are wanting a new environment and change for our future generation of USAG athletes? What I am asking is for you to please take a look into this situation and that you immediately take action to remove Valeri from being able to potentially harm more young women, which is a pattern from his past. I am currently involved in an investigation with SafeSport about the misconduct and potential athlete abuse and policy violations regarding Valeri, and I hope bringing this to your attention will speed up the process to have him removed. Liukin responded the following day. Thank you for your outreach, Mackenzie. We have forwarded your letter onto our SafeSport team. I've CC'd Becky St. John, who is our Safety and Compliance Counsel, who will follow up with you shortly with additional details. We appreciate you reaching out to us. Thank you, Lily. 95 minutes later, Wooford received an email from Janet Tarnowski, USA Gymnastics Director of Legal Operations. Thank you for your report to USA Gymnastics regarding Valeri Liukin. The information you provided has been reviewed. Tarnowski wrote, due to a conflict of interest, this matter has been referred to the U.S. Center for SafeSport. Marengi also emailed Liukin on February 9th. The fact that Valeri is still a part of USAG absolutely sickens me, Marenghi wrote. The verbal abuse I endured had a lasting impact on me, and I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. Although the damage he has done cannot be erased, future verbal abuse can be prevented. The U.S. Center for SafeSport has been interviewing alleged victims and witnesses since February, according to SafeSport emails and texts. I am still in the process of reaching out to other parties. The next step would be to send the notice of allegation to Valeri, Simone Cardosa, a U.S. Center for SafeSport, wrote in a February 17th email to Woodford. Liukin left his native Kazakhstan for Moscow as a teenager to train with the Soviet junior national team. Under the coaching of Eduard Yarov, Liukin moved to the Soviet national team. Yarov, 69, who owns his own gym in the Dallas area, was arrested in December and charged with one count of continuous sexual abuse of a child younger than 14, following a joint operation by the U.S. Marshals Task Force and the Dallas Police Department. Liukin won 4 individual gold medals, including the all-around, as well as silver and bronze at the 1987 European Championships. A year later, Liukin won Olympic gold medals in Seoul in the team competition and individual horizontal bar, and also picked up silver medals in the all-around and parallel bars. He immigrated to the U.S. in 1992, settling first in New Orleans before eventually opening Woga with Yevgeny Marchenko in Plano, an affluent suburb 20 miles north of downtown Dallas. The pair now own 3 Woga gyms in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Marchenko would also later become a U.S. Olympic and national team coach, and coached Carly Patterson, a Woga athlete, to the 2004 Olympic all-around title. 4 years later, Anastasiia Liukin won the Olympic all-around gold medal. Valeri Liukin continued to develop Olympic and World Championship medalists, including Madison Koshin, a 4-time world champion, who won an Olympic gold medal in the 2016 team competition. A month after the Rio de Janeiro Games, Liukin was named as Marta Karolyi's replacement as U.S. national team coordinator. Less than 18 months later, he stepped down against the backdrop of an increasing demand from Olympians and gymnastics fans that USA Gymnastics undergo a complete overhaul in the wake of the Nasser scandal. The present climate causes me, and more importantly my family, far too much stress, difficulty, and uncertainty, Liukin said in a statement at the time. He was hired in 2018 to coach the Brazilian national team. Liukin found himself back in the center of an international controversy for comments he made in an August 29 interview with a gymnastics website. It would be logical to suppose that in the U.S., there's a gymnastics move among black girls. Is that right? Liukin was asked by the interviewer, citing the success of Olympic all-around champions Simone Biles and Gabby Douglas. I don't think it's completely right, Liukin responded, but yes, gymnastics is changing. In the Code of Points, difficulty is very valued now. Of course, this suits African Americans. They're very explosive. Look at the NBA, who's playing and jumping there. When Tom Forrester stepped down as U.S. Women's National Team High Performance Director in December, USAG officials began focusing on Liukin as a replacement, according to 2 sources familiar with the process. I'm not surprised that USAG hasn't changed at all, but I'm still surprised that they're actually going through with this, Woodford said. Woodford joined Woga in 2010. She was 15. The first red flag was on the day we walked into the gym, Christy Woodford said. Mackenzie tried out in another Dallas area gym, and I said to Liukin, Mackenzie needs to take time to decide. And he said, no. If she wants to be a champion, she trains here. It was a little intimidating. Before long, Christy Woodford said she was receiving regular calls from Liukin, complaining that Mackenzie was fat. She weighed around 80 pounds. There was a lot of fear in the gym, Christy Woodford said. Girls were scared of him, scared to death. In both her complaint to the U.S. Center for SafeSport and her email to Lyon, Mackenzie Woodford said she witnessed Liukin force a teammate to run on a treadmill with a sweatsuit on until she lost enough weight that day to start practice. He forced a different teammate to leave the gym at 14 years old in the rain, who then walked home alone in Plano, Texas. That teammate, Woodford said, was Caitlin Ohashi, later a U.S. national team member and social media sensation as an NCAA champion at UCLA. Ohashi has frequently discussed how she was fat-shamed during her club and national team career. A representative for Ohashi was contacted with an interview request. Christy Woodford said she witnessed gymnasts competing and training with broken bones. Mackenzie Woodford competed and trained on a fractured foot and fractured tailbone, she and her parents said. I decided not to go to the gym anymore, Christy Woodford said. John Woodford, however, continued to visit Woga. There were constantly red flags, Woodford said. Liukin was coaching by intimidation. Girls were told they had to stand in the corner facing the wall. They were told they were fat. I witnessed that all the time. Pretty much every day, girls were told they were fat. All three Woffords recalled an incident when Liukin complained to John that Mackenzie had gained weight. I said she hadn't. She weighed nothing, John Wofford said. Mackenzie Wofford, in both her complaint to the U.S. Center for SafeSport and her email to Lyon, remembered being pulled into Valeri's office with my father to be told how fat I was getting. Valeri proceeded to bet my dad a month's tuition that I had gained weight. I was forced to go onto the bathroom scale with both of them to prove that my 75 to 80 pound 15-year-old self had not gained any weight, but in fact lost. Afterward, John Wofford said, Liukin just had this look on his face, this smug look. Gymnasts were also under constant pressure to lose weight during U.S. national team training camps at the Karolyi Ranch, according to SafeSport and USA Gymnastics documents and interviews. The style that went on at those camps with Valeri and the Karolyis was very belittling to these girls completely afraid to eat with their coaches were there, harassed if they had too much food on their plate. John Wofford, following the bet, never wrote another check to Woga because the family pulled Mackenzie out of the gym shortly thereafter, following the diarrhea incident at the U.S. national team training camp. This was abuse, he said. The Woffords complained to then USA Gymnastics CEO Steve Penny about Liukin. We had several calls back and forth, John Wofford said. Penny openly admitted he knew and understood what was going on. He said they were taking baby steps with Valeri. They can only do a little bit at a time politically in terms of addressing Liukin's coaching methods. Penny, according to Wofford, said USA Gymnastics was gathering data on Liukin. Penny also offered to send an autographed copy of Olympic champion Peter Vidmar's autobiography. Vidmar was chairman of USA Gymnastics Board of Directors at the time. Like that would make everything okay, Wofford said. I didn't even know who he was, Mackenzie Wofford said, referring to Vidmar. Penny, in an email to SCNG, said he was referring questions about his interaction with the Woffords to his attorney. Mr. Penny has no recollection of speaking to, meeting with, or knowing Mackenzie Wofford or her parents. Leah Roby, Penny's attorney, wrote in an email, taking baby steps and gathering data are not phrases Mr. Penny would use in conversations regarding such matters. If USA Gymnastics or Mr. Penny had concerns about Valeri, USAG and he would have addressed them directly. Mr. Penny did not offer a signed book by Peter Vidmar and would not have done so. In response to Roby's email, John Wofford said, "There's a reason his attorney responded and not him. I'm sure he also has no recollection of meeting or speaking with Valeri Liukin or Larry Nassar either." Liukin also called John Wofford. He said, "Let's work this out," Wofford recalled. But the Woffords were ready to move on. Informed that the family's decision to leave was final, Liukin said Mackenzie Wofford would never do college gymnastics, never go anywhere, was politically screwed. Instead, Wofford was later invited back by USA Gymnastics to U.S. national team training camp at the Karolyi Ranch. When she and her new coach pulled into the ranch, Liukin, Wofford said, was waiting for them. When I returned to the ranch, Valeri told my new coach how stupid she was for bringing me back there, and that he would be sure that I would never make it to college or any national team assignment and that I was blacklisted. Wofford, who later competed for Oklahoma, wrote in both her U.S. Center for SafeSport complaint and to Lyon, "I believe the words were that my coach was an expletive idiot for training me." Wofford arrived at Woga around the time Marengi said she was leaving the gym after 6 years of what she was told the U.S. Center for SafeSport was constant ridicule, bullying, and fat-shaming. At one point, Liukin thought she would be on the U.S. national team, Marengi said, but she tore an ACL when she was 12 and later suffered a similar injury. Doctors said the injuries were the result of growth plate issues, Marengi said. But Valeri said no, it's because you're overweight, she said. I was lazy and fat. Those were his two things. Even before the injury, Marengi said she had been a target of Liukin's alleged bullying. When she was 10 or 11, Marengi said, Liukin called her into his office. He said I was useless, worthless, she said. I would never amount to anything in life. This was a daily thing. There was a time when he called me over. He knocked on my head, not hard, but said, "Do you hear that? It's hollow. There's absolutely nothing in there." At one point, when she was around 10 or 11, she wanted to quit. Valeri asked me if I wanted to be a world champion or sit on the couch and eat potato chips. It was like I had to be an Olympic champion or I had to be a doctor or I'm going to be worthless. By 2009, her Olympic dream was completely gone due to injury, but she still wanted to continue competing in hopes of landing a college scholarship. Then the verbal abuse just worsened, Marengi said. It was a daily occurrence, talking about my weight, saying that I was going to hurt my knee again because I was too fat. I was a pig, an elephant. He asked me if I swallowed a balloon. Marengi left Woga in 2010 after she said Liukin pressured her to train on what she suspected was a broken ankle. She was struggling with a new skill, a double pike, when she injured her ankle. It blew up to the size of a basketball, Marengi said. He told me I had to keep going or I was done, and I just sat there. Valeri said if you don't do the double pike, you have to leave. I grabbed my stuff and left. The feeling of being worthless followed her to the University of North Carolina, where she continued to compete. I had no idea who I was, she said. She was all conference on the balance beam as a Tar Heel freshman before she suffered another knee injury, this time career-ending. Her grades weren't medical school material. I thought Valeri was right. I've amounted to absolutely nothing, Marengi said. That was driving a lot of these feelings of worthlessness. I started experimenting with a lot of drugs to numb everything. I wanted to feel absolutely nothing. But a lot of suppressed emotions all resurfaced. I was lazy, I was fat, I was useless. After her suicide attempt, she began therapy. There were so many things about what Valeri said and did that resurfaced, she said. I had to repair all that trauma to be a functional human being. And there's a note. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a hotline for individuals in crisis or for those looking to help someone. To speak with a certified listener, call 1-800-273-8255.